This is Marv Albert here at the United Center in Chicago for Game 2 of tonight's doubleheader between the Chicago Bulls and the Orlando Magic. And we are here live at the United Center, where the Chicago Bulls will sit atop the NBA with the best record in the league at 59-8. And they will go against the team in the Eastern Conference with the second best record, the Orlando Magic, with a record of 49-15. So Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls will go against their best rivals so far, Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway. I'm here with, to my left, the esteemed Steve Snapper Jones and the quizzical Bill Walton to my left. Bill, how will Chicago be able to contend with Shaquille O'Neal tonight? Shaquille O'Neal is unstoppable. Shaquille O'Neal coming into tonight's contest, Marv, is averaging 27.4 points per game, and he's shooting nearly 6% from the floor. He's grabbing rebounds. The last 5 games, he's averaging 13 rebounds per game. In the last 4 games, he's averaging 3.5 blocks. Shaquille O'Neal has been possessed over the past week or so, Marv. Chicago's going to really have to use their three-headed monsters as far as the centers are concerned. Luke Longley, Bill Winnington, and Buddha James Edwards. They're going to have to use those centers to the best of their ability. And Anthony Penny Hardaway, he has been better than advertised. To me, Penny Hardaway is the second coming of Magic Johnson. When Shaq was hurt earlier this season, Penny Hardaway was second in the league in scoring. He outshined Michael in the first game at Orlando in the first matchup between the two. Since Orlando beat Chicago last year in the playoffs, Penny Hardaway this year so far this season is averaging 22 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. He's the only guard other than John Stockton to shoot 50% from the floor this year. Penny Hardaway, in my opinion, the best point guard since Magic Johnson.
Magic Johnson? Come on, Bill. Come on, you're going way too far with that, Bill, now. Come on.
I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, man, that's the good old days of the NBA, man. When you know, it was great. You look forward to the games, you know what I'm saying? That's back in the day when you used to, make sure you look at the time, you know what I'm saying? Made sure that you cleared your schedule, because when that game came on at, let's say it was a night game, it came on at 8:00, you had to make sure that you ordered that pizza at 7:45 to make sure that you had a hot pie arriving just when tip-off occurred. You know what I'm saying? Or you made sure, if you was, cooking, everything be done by then, because everybody sat down and watched the game. You know what I'm saying? And it's not the same feeling anymore, man. I don't know what it is. Well, I know what it is in my opinion, but it's a lot of different reasons. Like the NBA just is not the same anymore. And I'm not trying to bash the NBA. I'm not trying to poo-poo people's, who love the game. And I'm glad you love the game if you like the way it's played now. But I get a feeling that the vast majority of people who grew up watching the NBA when I was watching it and before, they're not really big fans of the way it's played. And I know this just from interacting with literally hundreds of people on my channel and just people in my everyday life. So it's like, I'm not alone. And I'm going to watch these games. And in the playoffs, I enjoy watching the game a little bit better because, in the playoffs, you kind of have to, adjust. And I noticed in last year's playoffs, the mid-range game, which people say doesn't even matter anymore, it kind of mattered because people were starting to guard people and run them off that three-point line. And then, the value of being able to make a mid-range shot increased. And you saw how Kawhi Leonard utilized that during the playoffs last year. But these are some of the reasons why I don't enjoy watching the NBA anymore. Number one, the way that the game is promoted. When I was growing up, sports in general, not just basketball, but baseball, boxing, football, when I was watching that, sports is based upon rivalries. Most, are team sports, but it's based upon rivalries. In boxing, you had Ali versus, Foreman, or Ali versus, more commonly, Frazier. Leonard versus Hagler, or Leonard versus Hearns, or whatever. Holyfield versus Lewis, Holyfield versus Tyson. You had these rivalries in boxing. That's the individual sport. But in basketball, you've had so many different rivalries over the years. You had Lakers versus Celtics, of course, the biggest one. You also had, for a long period of time, Celtics versus Sixers in the late 70s into the 80s. Bulls versus Pistons, of course. For a while, Detroit versus Celtics in the 80s. Lakers versus the Pistons for a little while. Bulls versus, obviously, Knicks in the 90s. Lakers versus the Kings in the early 2000s. Even, Lakers versus Spurs. Even though it was becoming more individualized as LeBron versus, but even that versus Celtics for a while. There was these rivalries. Now you don't really have that. The only rivalry that you really kind of have is Lakers versus Clippers, but the way the media covers it is more LeBron versus Kawhi. And even that, 90% of the media is behind LeBron. So there's a lack of rivalries, and that's one of the things that has turned me off on the NBA. The second obvious reason to me is the gameplay, the style of play. It's street ball. It's you don't really have that individuality that you had when I was growing up. Guys had, when I was growing up, players had signature moves. Jordan, of course, had his fadeaway. He would, go on the block and, saying he had that fadeaway that you couldn't stop. Tim Duncan in his best years had the bank shot. He's the last guy I remember utilizing that bank shot. Shaq was just an unstoppable force inside. Kobe Bryant. I'll talk about him in a minute. Kobe had a plethora of moves. He's probably the most overall skilled guy I've seen as far as the move set that he had. Penny Hardaway was another guy. He wasn't a great three-point shooter, but Penny Hardaway was very solid, man. He had a mid-range. He developed an outside shot, a reliable one. He could score in the post. He could post you up. He was great. Now everybody does the same damn. Of course, Kareem had the hook shot, of course. Elvin Hayes turnaround, fall away jumper. Rick Barry could shoot from outside. He had the mid range, had a fadeaway, but back then he used to call it the fall away jumper. Bird, of course, could shoot all over the court. Kevin Durant, in this era, he could still shoot from all over the court. But what you have now is everybody just does the same goddamn thing, which is shoot threes. Okay, some of them better than others, but everybody shoot threes. It's like if in baseball, if everybody from 1 through 9 in the lineup just swung for the fences, the home run loses its excitability, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's not as exciting to watch it anymore. If everybody just swung for the fences. That's what made the home run era, the steroid era, exciting a little bit, because it was certain guys that were hitting home runs. Okay, you knew them. You look at them. Canseco looked like a home run hitter. McGuire looked like a home run hitter. Late stage Bonds looked like a home run hitter. The late 90s, early 2000s version of Sosa looked like a home run hitter. Juan Gonzalez looked like a home run hitter. Albert Bell looked like a home run hitter. Now it's like you got guys who are shortstops that can hit 40 homers. Everybody can hit home runs in Major League Baseball now. In my opinion, because the ballpark is smaller and the ball is more likely juiced up. Okay? And it's sort of lost its excitability. Back in the 90s, remember in the early 90s, mid 90s, teams only shot on average maybe 7 to 8 threes a game, a team. I remember Utah was a team that almost took no threes. They always led the NBA in field goal percentage. And on a good night, they might take 12. But they had many nights. I remember looking in the box score. I'm talking about the Karl Malone, John Stockton, Utah Jazz. They were the king of the pick and roll. They did not take a lot of threes. Outside of Stockton and Hornacek, maybe Howard Isley, maybe. They didn't take a lot of threes. So when someone took one, it was exciting because you didn't see a lot of that. Now everybody does it. It's become so ubiquitous that it's boring. So that's another thing that bothers me. Another thing that bothers me is the complete and total lack of defense. There's no defense in today's NBA. And, you really can't blame anything other than the rule changes for that. And, they want to build the audience, make the game more exciting for, people who aren't traditional basketball fans. But I hate it. I hate the fact that there's no defensive resistance the way that it used to be. And what irritates me the most is you watch today's guys put up, you see a guy and he's averaging 29, 30 plus points a game. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, if this motherfucker played 20 years ago, he wouldn't even average 15. I know he wouldn't average more than 15. And the reason why I know that is because a guy that was a superior shooter in Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf couldn't even crack 20. So it's and then you have people who say, oh, well, Abdul-Rauf, he probably wouldn't be nothing. So you're trying to tell me with a straight face, and all due respect to Trae Young, you're trying to tell me that Trae Young can average 29 points a game in this era. A guy who shoots 42% from the floor maybe and 34% from three. But you're telling me that Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, one of the greatest shooters of all time, couldn't average 30 points a game. Okay. That's frustrating. The defensive aspect of the game is just totally missing. Nobody cares if you're a bad defensive player. That doesn't count against you anymore. When I was growing up, if you were an all-time great, you had to work on the other side of the ball. That was emphasized. You couldn't just be a great scorer. That's what separated George Gervin and Bernard King and Alex English and Adrian Dantley from Michael Jordan and Jerry West, is that they all were great scorers. But on the other side of the ball, Jerry West in his era and Michael Jordan in his era were lockdown defenders. And that's what separated them from those other guys. Nowadays, doesn't matter if you're a bad defensive player. Doesn't matter if you don't give effort. All about how many points you put up. So that bothers me. When I was growing up, of course, you had great defenders from 1 through 5. In the perimeter, you had Gary Payton. You know what I'm saying? You had Darrell Walker. You had Nate McMillan. You had, who else? Mookie Blaylock. You know what I'm saying? You had a lot of guys who were great. Joe Dumars. Then, of course, you know what I'm saying, you had Gerald Wilkins, Alvin Robinson. Derek McKee, Stacey Augmon, Scottie Pippen, of course, Jordan. And then, you know what I'm saying, in the post you had Dennis Rodman, you had the shot blockers, Mutombo, you had Eaton, you had Mourning, you had Ewing, Dave Robinson, Olajuwon. You know, and the list goes on and on and on. You don't have that anymore. You don't have the shot blockers like that because there's no inside presence anymore. Everybody's on the perimeter. And then another thing, this is going to be the last reason. There's some other reasons I can give, but I'm just giving the main reasons why I don't like today's NBA coverage is ESPN. Okay? When I was growing up, okay, in my opinion, when I first started watching basketball, it was the tail end of the 89-90 season. So this was right at the end of CBS's coverage of the NBA. And I can tell you, in hindsight, that CBS's and NBC's coverage of the NBA was infinitely better than ABC's. Okay? Infinitely. Number one, the analysts that they had were usually former players, real players. Okay? Respected former players. Or coaches. Or they were sports journalists who were more than likely, at least to a certain extent, amateur historians of the game who've been watching it for decades. Today, you have a lot of people who are speaking from a script. They are being told not just to promote the league, but to promote an individual player. It's a cult of personality shit thing to a certain extent. And also, you get the idea that with people like Nick Wright and Chris Broussard, Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, that they've never played basketball, not even in high school, but you're supposed to listen to them and get sports wisdom from them, basketball wisdom from them, right? You have, stat nerds. And the only real NBA presence that they have are ass splinter NBA players, guys that were doing nothing but collecting splinters on their ass. You know what I'm saying? Remember when the Three Stooges, when Mo used to get kicked into a cactus and they used to bend him over and they used to pull out the cactus, the little cactus needles out of his ass with pliers. That's what the NBA players should have to do with, guys like Kendrick Perkins and Ryan Hollins at the game. Oh, get them out, bro. Get these motherfuckers out my ass. I ain't get a minute to play. Not ain't a second in this bitch. Pipe down. Pulling the motherfucking splinters out his ass. But yeah, and then, you have people on there who don't really know anything about the NBA before 2000. It's getting that bad. It's getting that bad. I remember them saying, the dinosaur years were the 50s and 60s, but now they're saying the 70s. Now they're even including the 80s. They're trying to tear down the legacy of Magic and guys like that. Now I'm hearing people saying Magic was a bum. And it's having a deleterious effect on young people. They don't know anything about the NBA's history. So yes, these are some of the reasons why it's hard for me to watch today's game. It's hard for me to listen to the commentary. It's hard for me to really enjoy the NBA. But I will cover it because I know that you guys are basketball fans. But I will not really enjoy it until the playoffs. That's when I really get into it more. The stakes are there. I need that competition. I need that. I don't know. It's just I need, for the stakes to be there. Something there. Look, there's some marquee teams out there. There's still some great players. LeBron is an all-time great player, in my opinion, top 10. Kevin Durant's top 20, in my opinion, or damn near. Russell Westbrook is probably top 50 when everything's said and done. As much as I don't like his game, James Harden is probably going to be top 50 when everything's said and done. Kawhi, I don't rate him as high as some people do because he's missed too many games, in my opinion. But he's up there. He's going to be top 30 probably when everything's said and done, despite the lack of, longevity. I think Curry's overrated a little bit by his fan base, but Curry's going to be top 25 or so when everything's said and done. Like I said, there's a lot of great players playing right now. Chris Paul is going to be top 30, 35. So there's a lot of great players. I'm not saying that. But there's a lot of low IQ basketball. And the gameplay is soporific. All right? So at the end of the day, that's what I got to say, man. Tell me what you guys think.